You're listening to the Doc Lounge podcast. This is a place for candid healthcare conversations with physician recruitment industry's top executives and thought leaders. This podcast is made possible by Pacific Companies, your trusted advisor in physician recruitment. My name is Summer Gilbert, and I am the Director of Marketing and Branding here at Pacific Companies. Well, thank you for tuning in. Today, I have our Director of Physician Recruitment and Locum Tenens, Ian Glendenning. Thank you for being here, Ian.
Thank you for having me.
And our lead risk management specialist, Marita Hyatt.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, so today we're going to talk about credentialing, and specifically for locum tenens, and we're going to help you make the process as smooth as possible if you're not used to kind of the credentialing side of things. I think a lot of physicians, and correct me if I'm wrong, don't realize that there's a lot of stuff that they need to gather for the process, and so it kind of makes the process longer when they're not aware.
Yeah, definitely.
So Ian, let's start with you. Maybe just kind of take me through working with a physician that has never worked locum tenens before, and how do you navigate that process with them to get them ready for their assignment?
Sure, of course. That's a great question. So first off, when you call Pacific Companies, we like to get to know you a little bit. So tell us about your current situation, your availability, your experience with locum tenens. Have you had any colleagues who have done locums before? So just to kind of get an idea of how much you know about locums, because really it's not that scary. And we're here to hold your hand and walk you through the whole process and address any questions you have. Our recruiters, our credentialing team do a fantastic job in being there for you 24/7. So just to start off, that first conversation with one of our recruiters to get to know you, address any initial questions you might have. And then all we really need in the beginning is a current CV, and really month, years, all that information is one of the most important things about the CVs, addressing any gaps. And then we send you out a few background forms. So just ask you about any background issues, malpractice cases, privileges being revoked, all of that stuff. And that's it. So then we introduce you to our credentialing department, which is Marita here.
Hi, everyone.
Marita, so you take it from there. So they come to you. What are all, there's probably a number of items that they're going to need. Well, how do you start?
Right. So what we typically do, if we have worked with a hospital in the past, what we have on file is a list of what all they're going to need. And some are very facility specific. Some want a little bit different things, but in general, most of them want pretty much the same things. So what we do is go through and see what documents we're going to need and send that over to the doctors. And depending on how organized they are, it really makes a difference for this entire process, for how smoothly it goes from the very beginning. And there are definitely some things that I've seen along the way that seem to have made a huge difference. I think the easiest I've ever seen was a physician that had Google Docs, where they had all of their credentialing available on Google Docs. So the instant you asked for any of their supporting docs, they just shared a link. Mm-hmm. And that was wonderful because it controls who you share it with. And as soon as you are no longer comfortable or you no longer think that the person needs access to your personal documents, you can just revoke their access. So it makes it super easy to work with a locums company because you can share it with people. They can download anything that they need. And then when you're done working with that company, you can revoke their access and you just go back to having your privacy.
Yeah. What is a common thing that people don't realize that they need that you...
One of the most common ones that we run into is pertaining to the DEA. I know we run into that a lot where physicians don't realize that when you're going on an assignment, you have to have the DEA with the business address in the state where you're going to be practicing in. So if you're, let's say, Monday to Friday working your own practice and then on weekends want to go provide coverage in a different state, what we typically recommend is that the person have a secondary DEA that they can transfer the address to that other state, because the address change can take anywhere from 4 to 7 days, or during graduation season can even take a couple of weeks to change over. So it's not really feasible to sit there and swap it back and forth. Friday night I'm going to change my DEA, I'm going to go work an assignment in a different state, and then Monday I'm going to come back. So you can't really flip-flop it. But that's definitely a pretty large misconception that we run into, is people thinking, I have one DEA and it's fine. It applies to all the states, when it doesn't quite work out like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are two great points that Marita brought up. In doing locums, the initial documents for your supporting documents and immunizations, your residency, your training information, all of that's going to be the same for every single facility that you submit your application and for any recruiting firm you work with. So it really makes sense to have all that information in one saved file, because you're going to be using that over and over again, and we're going to be asking for the same information for each hospital. So if you have that in one file, that's really going to expedite the process. And the other point she brought up was multiple DEAs. I think that's a fantastic idea, because some doctors, they do locums on the side. So you want to have one DEA for your current facility that you work at full time, and then let's say you do locums on the weekend, and let's say that's in another state or another facility, you're going to need to change that DEA. So it's really a fantastic idea to have multiple DEAs if you're seriously considering and doing locums.
Do you guys come across where different facilities and practices ask for different things, or is it pretty commonly the same stuff?
It's usually pretty common. I think the biggest differences I run into are whether or not, as far as whether or not they'll allow them to get some of their immunizations done. Some are very strict about them wanting, let's say, their TB up to date. Other ones will allow them to walk in on their first day, go to orientation, stop by employee health, get your TB screening done. So that one is just one of the examples on where they might be a little more lax.
Mm-hmm. So let's just go through that list really quickly, if you don't mind. Driver's license, their national provider ID, correct? Let's see, their medical license.
Definitely.
And are these things that you guys can look up on your own? Or is it just, it's obviously a lot better for them to
right.
have
So
it?
some of that information we can look up. We can look up licenses, and what we typically do is go through their CV and look at the places they trained at. Where did you do your residency? Where did you do your medical school? And then places of employment. Because typically we'll find their licenses just by seeing what state those were in. We can look up their NPI number. But for things like your DEA number, no one is able to look that up, just like nobody can look up your social security number.
Mm-hmm. Their board certification, right?
Correct. And that's one we could look up.
Their CV, that's something they create.
Correct.
Let's see. You said TB, immunizations. I hate that word. Immunizations. And then here I say is it Hep B and what other ones?
And so that's just kind of a list of their immunizations that they would typically ask for. If you're in the winter months, they're going to require you to have flu, then your hepatitis vaccines, your MMR, your TB, just to list a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to malpractice insurance, we cover that, correct?
We do, but most of the hospitals typically require anywhere from 5 to 7 years of your past insurance history.
Oh, gotcha.
So what they're looking for is actually called a certificate of insurance. So this is just like if you go to your car insurance and you say, hey, I want proof that I have insurance. This is just looking for your malpractice insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is something that drastically can either speed up or slow down the credentialing process if you already have this on file. So it's a good idea of any time you work a job to go ahead and ask for this certificate of insurance for your malpractice, just because it can take quite a bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wanted to go and attain this on your own, what I typically advise people to do is to call the facility and ask for their risk management department, or if they don't know who that is, to ask for the medical staff office and say, hey, I want proof of my insurance from my time with you guys. And they can get you to the right area. If you're working for someone that's a little bit smaller, like a private practice where you are helping out, usually the office manager can handle that.
Gotcha. So also on the list, let's see, medical school, postgraduate training, diplomas, that kind of stuff.
Right. And those are just the diplomas. And typically you can just snap pictures of those with your phone and just save the photo, because most people are pretty technologically savvy these days. So just take a picture. You don't have to scan it or anything fancy.
And then one thing that I know we actually did a blog on, or you did a blog on recently, was case logs. And that's a pretty important one, right?
Right. So that's probably one of the biggest issues that we run into with credentialing is physicians that say either, I'm still a resident, I'm still a fellow, I don't have case logs, or depending on their specialty, they think they don't have them, which just typically is not the case at all. I don't think we've had any at all so far where they don't have case logs at all. We're usually able to get something back. So a case log, patient encounter log, procedure log is just a list of procedures, encounters, patients, a list of what you've done. What we're typically looking for is the past 24 months, and how many of each procedure you've done. Have you done bone marrow aspirates? How many have you done in the past 2 years? And again, this can be requested typically just directly from the medical staff office. So it's a really good idea to keep these up to date and current because it takes some time for them to pull those records.
In every specialty, is there a lot of some like different things that are documentation that comes with different specialties that some might have more than others?
Oh, definitely. It just kind of depends on what they're doing. Like radiologists, for example, where they're just reading film all day, their case logs are going to be off the charts because they're just reading, which is going to be a lot faster than, say, like a family practice provider, where you're seeing one patient at a time and you're really taking the time with that patient.
Yeah, typically, historically, we were seeing hospitals predominantly requesting case logs for subspecialties, so proceduralists, surgeons, things of that nature. But now we're seeing it's more common that they are asking them for primary care as well. So typically, if you are, let's say a surgeon, for example, the facility that you're going to be credentialed at, they're going to want to see those case logs. So my recommendation would be, if you are thinking of doing locums or doing locums, when you're on an assignment, is to go by HR or the IT department at the end of your assignment and request those case logs, because you're going to need those for the next facility that you work at. So it really helps to expedite the process in getting credentialed at multiple facilities and doing locums by staying on top of those case logs, because it's going to come up. So the next facility you get credentialed at, they're going to want to make sure you know what you're doing. So
yeah,
I definitely recommend keeping those case logs current.
That's actually a really good idea on your last day, stopping by, because I feel like the hospital staff on whole is much more responsive. If you're stopping in person, you can sign any consent release that they want authorizing it, and just get it before you go.
Yeah.
And then a couple more questions. So Ian, say a physician is looking for a job. Do they do their credentialing before the interview? Because, I mean, they could get the job, but then the credentialing, they don't have anything. They don't have case logs, and then they don't want to, the client doesn't want to move forward. How does that work?
Right. So that's a great question. So initially, the first steps that we take with a clinician that wants to do locum tenens with us, we need your CV, and then we need the background forms, a consent release, a locum tenens provider agreement, a disclosure form. So a couple documents that are real quick, and we have those sent out to you by HelloSign. You can do them right on your phone. You can have them done in a matter of minutes. So that's the initial step that we need for the first step in credentialing with Pacific companies. And that's beneficial for us to have, because we can also expedite the process when we have a position that's of interest for you. With locum tenens, it's all about speed. So we want to move as quick as possible to present you in the best light. But in terms of getting fully credentialed with us, it really comes down to how committed you are for the position and if you really want that job. So if that's a position you want, I guarantee you that being fully credentialed is going to help you get that job. So it's going to cross over a lot with other jobs as well. So we know that everyone is allergic to doing paperwork, but as a doctor, there's going to be some paperwork involved.
Yeah.
So the more that we have and the more credentialed you are with us is going to help us for this job and the next job as well.
Say I'm the doctor that has everything she needs saved in my Google Docs. How quickly will that process be?
I think it really depends on your specialty, because I know for outpatient clinics, we're able to get people credentialed very quickly because they're not seeking privileges in the actual hospital. When you're trying to get privileges in the hospital, it typically slows things down, because then you're waiting on committee meeting, board meetings, and a lot of times those only meet once a month. So that slows things down. So unfortunately, the answer for that is it really just depends.
Okay.
Right. So typically, for a clinical position where you're just working outpatient clinic, we can get that done in a matter of weeks. When it comes up to getting hospital privileges, as Maria had mentioned, there's multiple committee meetings and reviews of your application. That takes a little bit more time, so that's a matter of a few weeks.
Okay.
But sometimes, in some cases, the hospital will grant emergency privileges, and really that comes down to how bad they need you, but they can do that as well, which can be expedited.
Okay. I mean, it seems like the credentialing process is just, if they have all their information, you just make sure it's legit, right? It's all good stuff. And then now it's in the client's hands, the hospital's hands, or right? And
to a certain extent, I know there are times where the hospital will reach out saying, hey, we're having problems getting this verification back, be it from a former employer, from a reference. And then that's when we will step in and either ask the physician for a new reference. Can you reach out to the reference? We will try calling them. Obviously, before, we like to play middleman and try to keep the physician from being bothered as much as possible. But if it does come down to where we're having problems getting in contact with someone, we will convey that back to the doctor. Hey, we're having a little bit of issue here. Is there anything that you can do to help? Do you have like an inside contact we can reach out to?
Yeah. And say I'm a locums doctor working with you guys, and I ended my assignment, and now I want to do another assignment somewhere. All my information is saved, right? And so once you work with us once, the process is a lot easier.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's all saved, and everything's confidential as well. So it's our firewalls on our database protects all of your information, so it's all safe, and we don't share any of your information unless we have your permission first. So if we have a job, one of our recruiters is going to present you. We introduce you to the client, sometimes do a phone interview, but we will not submit your information or your application until we have your permission.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for giving us especially me, a rundown on everything. It's nice for me to be in this position and not really know how things go, so I can ask questions that really kind of give the cliff notes of credentialing. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
Yeah, I just want to say, so some of the key points on that list that Summer was mentioning, definitely, as Maria had mentioned as well, is the multiple DEAs. That makes it beneficial to expedite things. Peer references, too, that's a key point that helps get the process moving faster in terms of working with us to get your references taken care of, immunization records, and then those procedure logs. So those are the most challenging in terms of the last things that we need to get. So if we have those, we're good to go. And be nice to your credentialing people. They're here to help as well.
Yes.
So the only other thing I would add, kind of piggybacking off of that for references, is if you want to be nice to your credentialer, please don't give us their office numbers. Typically, we end up calling, we get your admin assistant. Your admin assistant does not want to give us your email address. So typically, we end up working as a middleman to another middleman who, they don't know if we're a patient calling in trying to get your references, private information. So typically, it just slows that process down. So if you haven't talked to your references in a while, give them a call, get in contact, get their email addresses, get their cell phone numbers. It really does help a lot.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, if you are listening and you are interested in working locum tenens, we have amazing assignments nationwide, and we'd love to help you. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks, Ian and Marita, for all your information. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all our listeners. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes air, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you to Pacific Companies. Without you guys, this podcast would not be possible. If you'd like to be a guest or for more information, go to www.pacificcompanies.com.